Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you all so much for joining us today. I'm Assemblymember Mark Berman, and I want to welcome everyone to this virtual conversation on the student transfer experience. I chair the Select Committee on the Master Plan for Higher Education in California, which was first established in 2017 to conduct a thorough legislative review to ensure the master plan reflects the current needs of students and responds to a host of issues never previously envisioned. In 1960, California developed a visionary plan for the future of higher education, known as the Master Plan. However, much has changed since 1960. Population growth, increased student diversity, a change in leading industries and their need for talent, as well as the field of education itself. During the first 2 years of the Select Committee's information gathering phase, we convened 5 hearings throughout the state, including in Sacramento, San Jose, Fresno, and Riverside. The hearings focused on the status of higher education in California, workforce needs, the needs of students, the needs of faculty and staff, and an overview of higher education finance. Earlier this year, the Select Committee released our report outlining key findings and policy themes that highlight important takeaways from the 5 hearings. The report also previewed that the Select Committee will next focus on the transfer process. Transfer is an essential component of the master plan's commitment to access and also impacts affordability as it relates to time to degree. However, the master plan did not say how transfer would work in practice for students. Transfer, by definition, is intersegmental, and each higher education system has a role to play. While recent efforts such as the Associate Degree for Transfer and remedial education reform have led to important gains, one thing that has been abundantly clear to the Select Committee throughout our hearings is that the transfer process is still unnecessarily complex and difficult for the vast majority of students to navigate. We learned that although a majority of community college students enroll with the goal of transferring, only 4% do so within 2 years, and only 38% after 6 years. There is a clear need to further streamline and make the transfer process easier for students to navigate, especially during these challenging and unprecedented times. Now more than ever, it is critical to increase degree attainment, improve time to degree, and close equity gaps. I look forward to engaging with all stakeholders to identify solutions and craft meaningful transfer legislation for the coming year. I cannot think of a better way to kick off our transfer conversation and begin the process of identifying ways to improve transfer than by hearing directly from the students who lived it. I want to thank the Campaign for College Opportunity for their advocacy and leadership on transfer, and I'm glad to be partnering with them on this event, Elevating Student Voices. Today's discussion is also very timely, as last week was National Transfer Student Week, a time to set. By the way, I transferred from university, so I didn't realize this, but last week was National Transfer Student Week, which I should have celebrated. And it's a time to celebrate transfer students and the professionals who support them on their journeys. We will begin today's event with an overview of transfer in California by the Campaign for College Opportunity. We will then hear from the students themselves, who will share their transfer stories. And to complement the student stories, we will hear from the RP group, which has recently released a report focused on how focused on the student experience in the transfer journey based on a survey and interviews with over 800 California community college students. Following this presentation, we have set aside time for questions from the audience. There is a Q&A box at the bottom of your screen where you will be able to submit questions throughout the event. You don't need to wait for the Q&A portion to submit your question, and we'll get to as many questions as we can before our 2:30 p.m. deadline. Before we begin, I would like to thank my team, led by Ellen Green, my legislative director, and Elizabeth Schmidt, my legislative aide, who have worked tirelessly on the efforts of the Select Committee. I'm also grateful to be joined by Assemblymember Irwin, Assemblymember Dr. Eggman, and Dr. Weber, who are all members of the Select Committee. My colleagues have been invaluable participants during our hearings, and I'll look forward to their continued engagement as we focus on transfer. And before we get to the rest of the program, I wanted to offer my colleagues the opportunity to make any opening remarks if they would like to. I see Assemblymember Irwin.
Yes. Thank you so much, Assemblymember Berman, for your leadership on higher education issues and for bringing us together today to hear about the student transfer experience. The ability to transfer from your local community college to a Cal State or UC to complete a bachelor's degree is critical for meeting our future workforce needs and setting young people on a stable, good paying career path. Frankly, the first time, and you mentioned it, the first time I saw how long the average student spends at a community college, I was shocked. Those extra years are years that can put students further into debt, and they lessen the odds that they're ever going to get an associate degree, much less a four-year degree. I've been very encouraged by the attention that has been on this issue and the reforms that have been put in place in recent years, especially relating to remedial education and basic skills. We have much further to go, however, in order to meet our goals. And as you mentioned, the COVID-19 pandemic has exposed and exacerbated existing inequalities in our communities, especially relating to the digital divide and basic needs. So look forward to hearing from the students and the stakeholders on how we can make the transition from community college to a four-year institution as seamless as possible, and how we can continue to support our students so that they can reach their full potential.
Thank you, Assemblymember Irwin. And would yes, please, Dr. Eggman.
Yeah, and if I just echo what you've already said, and thank you so much for your leadership on this, Mr. Berman, and to my colleagues for joining, and to all the students and advocates who are here on the call. We know the incredible importance of the role our community colleges play, and it doesn't do us any good to have some of the best systems of higher education in the country if they can't talk to each other. It seems like it'd be a simple process to have systems be able to talk with each other, but unfortunately, experience tells us that's not always true. So I look forward to hearing about personally your stories so that we can better identify barriers in the paths of that. Because the longer and the more time it takes for students to be able to transfer into hopefully a public university, the more at risk they are for some of these predatory for college institutions that will come in and offer an easy way out that tends to be not so easy in the long run and very expensive and not with a whole lot of value. So that's just one more reason to make this process seamless. And then, as has been mentioned, as we're talking about COVID and more things remotely and online, it seems like an opportunity. Anytime there's a crisis, it's an opportunity to create lasting change. So I look forward to hearing us going forward and coming up with some real solutions. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Eggman. Dr. Weber.
Yes, I too want to echo the comments of my colleague.
Oh, Dr. Weber, we lost you to mute.
I know it went on its own. I don't know what's going on. Someone probably is manipulating it from somewhere else. But once again, thank you, Mark, for bringing us all together and for being diligent about this particular issue. I know we brought it up several times over the last 7 or 8 years and have done very little to address it. And unfortunately, our community colleges don't get as much attention as they should, despite the huge number of students that attend their community college and the fact that that it truly is the foundation of our educational system. We often think the UC is and then the CSU, but it's really the other way around because the system was designed to meet the needs of every Californian. And that's why we have 3 tiers. And each tier has to work effectively in order to make sure that every Californian has the kind of educational experience they want that leads them to the kind of life and career and futures that they expect. And so ignoring one portion of it is not very effective for us because clearly it prolongs it and it basically begins to decrease the percentage of those who will actually be successful and feel good about being there. I've had friends who've been in community college for 20 years, but they took a different route and they never regretted it. But surely if they added and subtracted the economic loss that they experienced as a result of being deterred by so many things, whether it's counseling or just life itself, sometimes takes a turn and you have to do something differently for a moment. But it's always good that our community colleges are great places because students can always come back. They can always restart. They can always find their place in their space. And that's really, really important. So it is truly the foundation of our whole entire system. So I'm pleased that we're at least meeting today and talking about how to make it a more effective process. And I know when a student transfers, it is a hallelujah moment for most of them. I used to counsel students at San Diego State in my department, and they were so ecstatic when they could walk into my office and realize that they have finally arrived at San Diego State with an unusual journey, but nonetheless, they arrived, and that's what's important. So once again, thank you for doing this, Mark. I really appreciate it. But also thanks to you, the students will get a chance to hear your voices, because we don't always get a chance to do that. And once you've lived the transfer experience and you walk through it, it may sound good to us in theory, but in practicality, it could be a totally different experience. And I'm sure you know that. So once again, thank you. I look forward to hearing what you have to say, and hope that it will somehow or another direct us and instruct us is what we need to do at the state level. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Dr. Weber, Dr. Eggman, and Assemblymember Irwin for your leadership on these issues and for sticking with the select committee that we've had for so long. I really appreciate your engagement over the last few years. And with that, I'll turn it over. I believe Josh Hagan is from the Campaign for College Opportunity, is going to give us the overview of transfer in California. Thank you, Josh, so much for helping convene everybody today, and also for providing an overview of transfer in California.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Assemblymember Berman, and to all of the members of the Assembly who are joining us today for this very, very important conversation. So the state of transfer, for most folks on this call, it's not the first time we're having a conversation about transfer. We understand what a key role it plays in our higher education system, and we understand some of the hurdles and the barriers that still exist. So this is going to be a very brief overview for those tuning in today. But like Assemblymember Berman said, my name is Josh Hagan. I'm with the Campaign for College Opportunity, which is a broad-based bipartisan coalition, including businesses, education, and civil rights leaders, that's dedicated to ensuring all Californians have an equal opportunity to attend and succeed in college. So I'm going to start by giving an overview of the role that transfer plays in helping California students achieve their educational goals. You're going to hear this a lot more eloquently from our student panelists here today, a lot of whom have already transferred or are in that process right now. Transfer plays a critical role in helping students attain a bachelor's degree, which offers students pathways through the CSU, the University of California, and our AICCU institutions. But the main problem that we see is that students are still taking far too long to transfer. 19% of students with a goal of transferring do so in 4 years, and only 28% successfully transfer within 6 years. So a lot of us have the idea, or the notion, that transfer is something that happens within 2 years. It's a very quick process. But the data tells us that that's not what's happening for our students in California. Furthermore, equity gaps still persist. So while Latinx students represent 51% of students who declare a goal of earning a degree and successfully transferring, they only represent 35% of students who transfer within 4 years. For our Black students, they represent 7% and 5% respectively. So that's a real concern. There are some real persistent equity gaps that we still need to address as a state. And then even for guaranteed transfer pathways, such as the associate degree for transfer, these same equity gaps remain. For example, fewer than 1/3 of Black Californians who graduated from a community college did so with an associate degree for transfer, as opposed to local traditional associate's degrees. And so I will be sharing a link in the chat to the Campaign for College Opportunity's latest research, which helps break down some of these equity gaps that I mentioned. So I mentioned the associate degree for transfer, which is a transfer pathway that we at the Campaign for College Opportunity have a soft spot for. That's something that we helped champion along with many of you stakeholders and segments on this call. And so we are at a pivotal moment in the implementation of this particular transfer pathway. A new wave of students are being placed onto transfer course taking patterns, thanks in large part to recent reforms to college level placement and student supports at our community college under Assembly Bill 705. Thank you to Assemblymember Irwin, who is on this call for that particular piece of legislation. So we are seeing a new wave of students who are transfer eligible because they're no longer being hindered and held back by remedial courses in the community college. And what we need to do is make sure that we're ready for that incoming wave of students. I think it's also particularly important to note the COVID context that we are in. So we are excited to be able to hear from some of the student leaders that we have with us this afternoon to share their experiences within the transfer process. These student leaders are tireless advocates for advancing equity in our higher education system. We're grateful to be able to learn from them today. A lot of you probably recognize these student panelists. There is no shortage of issues that they could be choosing to lend their time to as we respond to this COVID context. And so we're especially grateful that they're choosing to spend their time focusing on transfer with us today. All of us here on this call today, we're committing ourselves to listen to what hurdles and obstacles are still hindering students in the transfer process, to learn from innovation and best practices from our staff and faculty who have quickly reimagined student services and supports amid a global health pandemic, and to move forward with solutions that are going to best set our students up to succeed. So thank you to everybody who's joining us on this call today for being a part of this movement. Finally, I'd like to thank Assemblymember Mark Berman for co-hosting this important conversation with us. We appreciate your leadership on this issue, and we're very grateful to be working with you today. So right now, I would like to turn it back over to Assemblymember Berman, who will introduce our student panelists.
Thank you so much, Josh. And now we're going to get to the part that I know so many of us are eager to hear, which is a conversation on the student transfer experience with our students. So we're going to start off with Rochelle Czar, who's a student at Sacramento State. And Rochelle, tell us a little bit about your transfer story.
Yeah, thank you. So I basically, I arrived in 2012 and I transferred to Bakersfield College, and I transferred in 2016. It took me 4 years to transfer out. And my transfer journey consisted of me following the I Get C pattern, which was meant to help students get from a community college to a UC. My original goal was to attend a UC, but due to cost inflation, I had to change my route to a CSU pattern. And this led to me having to take additional courses since both routes hold different transfer requirements. I also had to attend 3 different community colleges just to make sure that I could graduate, on time, because a lot of the classes at Bakersfield College would fill. And then I decided my major a year after being at BC, which was English. But I think for what I did want to mention clearly was that I wasn't really informed the importance of the placement exam. I didn't even know that I determined the classes I would be getting. And it just didn't make sense to me because when I took the test, I was placed in the lowest English class. But originally I was taking honors English in high school. So I think that was a huge difference that I kind of like walked right into. And then I actually asked my community college if I could retake the placement test. And only after retaking it, I was placed correctly into the courses that I was supposed to be in.
Thank you, Rochelle, and for highlighting some of the kind of unnecessary hurdles that set you back along that path. But congrats for succeeding. And next up, we have Joshua Potgieter, who's a student at San Diego Community College in the San Diego Community College District. Josh, please.
Hello, thank you, Assemblymember Berman, for having me, and for all the other Assembly members who have taken their valuable time to show up and to listen from the students is very important. I am a student at the San Diego Community College District. I'm attending 3 of the colleges within them at the same time: San Diego City College, San Diego Mesa College, San Diego Miramar College. I'm also involved in ASG at San Diego City College as a government affairs officer, and I'm an outreach ambassador as well. So I'm not planning on only representing my own voice, but also mentioning a lot of the concerns that I've been hearing. So that will be one thing that I'll be doing. I'm in the middle of the transfer process. Will be this fall. I'll be transferring. My dream colleges are Columbia University, UCLA, UC Berkeley, and University of Southern California, just to name a few. So I'm planning on just exhibiting some of the processes that are involved in transferring. But thank you for having me.
Thank you so much, Josh, for participating. Good luck in the transfer process. You got a lot of great schools that you're looking at, so I hope they all turn out well. And next up, we have Gerald Richardson III, who's a student at Ventura County Community College District. Gerald, tell us a little bit about your story.
Certainly. Hi, everyone. First and foremost, it's such an honor to be here amongst so many brilliant policymakers and so many brilliant student leaders. My name is Gerald Richardson III. I'm a student in the Ventura County Community College District. I'm a pre-law political science and sociology double major. And to touch on a little about my transfer journey, I graduated high school with a really abysmal 2.3 GPA. And now in college, I have straight A's in addition to being in the honors program. In my time at community college, I worked 2 jobs, take classes at 4 different California community colleges. I'm the Senate Chair of Student Government and the Vice President of the Black Student Union. When I first started community college, I kind of looked at it as a second chance, a chance to kind of start fresh and have a clean slate. And during my surrender to learning, I absolutely fell in love. However, while learning is invigorating and applying various course concepts is gratifying, there are some serious challenges that I faced along the way. And the hardest so far has been surviving in the face of affordability. I've noticed that a lot of the time, there is little to no curriculum that represents the experiences, the history of me, Black, Indigenous people of color, and then the services offered aren't always culturally responsive or equipped to support first-gen, low-income students of color. And what I deem the most deleterious is that seldom do I see professors and staff that actually look like me, who I could go to and identify with, go to for an advice, mentoring, and support. And this indubitably has impeded my academic progress and transfer pathway. So I'm excited to talk about this. Thank you.
Thank you, Gerald. And those are such important issues. Some of those came up in some of the hearings that we had also. And California has a long, long, long way to go to make sure that every student in our school has a professor, has a role model, has somebody they can go to who looks like them and has experienced some of the same things they have. So thank you for raising that issue. Next, I would like to introduce Jared Vargas, who's a student at University of the Pacific. Jared, thanks so much for joining us today.
Thank you, Assembly Member. I first attended community college after I graduated high school, and I had a longer pathway to transferring. I graduated high school back in 2007 and entered community college during the recession during that time, and so it was characterized by a very difficult. Being very difficult to find work in order to support yourself. In addition, I was actually self-supporting on my own. I didn't really have family support. And, over time, I began to have struggles in maintaining enough employment to where I ended up experiencing housing and food insecurity, and which ultimately resulted in me dropping out. I had parents who were unable to help me with the FAFSA sign-in or FAFSA process. So I ended up going part-time a lot, saving up enough to take classes when I could. If I couldn't save up enough, then I didn't take classes. And as I mentioned, in addition, I kept going, kept persisting. My grades were lower when I struggled, but I managed to get stable enough when I went to San Joaquin Delta College. I stuck through, and when I was in a more stable position, my grades turned around. I was on president's lists my entire career at Delta College, and I managed to transfer, luckily, to the University of the Pacific on a transfer scholarship, which I felt I was really lucky for. Thank you.
You worked pretty hard for that luck. So I'm not sure. I think it was more hard work than luck, but Jared, thank you for persisting. We heard from so many students. I've personally heard from so many students who struggle with basic needs, food insecurity, homelessness. And it's a huge focus of mine and my colleagues, and something that we're going to continue to focus on at the legislature to make sure that students get the support they need so that they can succeed, which is what our economy needs. So it's really appreciate you raising those issues. Next, I would like to introduce Alexis Zaragoza, and I hope I got that right or close to right, Alexis, who's a student at UC Berkeley. Alexis, thanks so much for joining us. Tell us about your story.
Thank you. That was actually a really great one on your part. Thank you for that. So yes, hi everyone. My name is Alexis Zaragoza. I'm a Cherokee and Chicano student at UC Berkeley. I was previously at Modesto Junior College, but I also attended 3 other colleges during that time to finish up requirements, as many of us have to do. So I also actually currently serve as the student regent on the UC Board of Regents and previously served on the California Community Colleges Board of Governors as well. So when I graduated high school, I actually did not finish my A through G requirements. I'm from a small rural town in the Central Valley. I barely kept at a 2.9 GPA on lucky semesters. And I had a total of 2 AP classes that I had taken, making me not very competitive, even though that was all that my school offered. Our schools over here are very focused on sending people into the warehouses, into the fields, into farming, into the military for the most part. And so community college was a huge second chance for me. And once I got into community college, I was able to suddenly have resources that I never had before, right? I had tutoring, I had counseling. And so during that time, I actually started to maintain straight A's throughout almost my entire community college career. And while I was there, I was very bothered by how everyone around me seemed to have been there for 5 to 7 years or more, something that is also very normal for us to see. And I didn't want to be one of those students. And so I became very passionate about AB 705 and was able to benefit from it as well. I did have some problems with counselors because a lot of the roles are hidden. I almost graduated 1 unit away from being able to attain my AAT because of a kind of random math rule where they combined classes to combined units. And so I almost made it out in that way, and I would have had to take on extra semesters. I actually ended up taking an extra year to end up applying to the UCs and CSUs because of not having everything together financially. And so that was something else that extended my time. I ended up taking an extra year to feel financially stable enough. I was not able to apply to 4 different UCs because the UC requirements were not within line of each other. And I almost didn't apply to UC Berkeley. I didn't have the application fee money. And the last minute, the last day of the application, I was able to get that from a friend, which I was very lucky for. And so one of the main takeaways is for me that transfer did not stop there. It didn't stop at me getting accepted and getting into UC Berkeley. And even now, 2 years into UC Berkeley, I still find many issues, right, with being a transfer student on the other side, and how that continues on to affect us for our career choices, for debt, and for, even grad school and things like that. So reform is needed there as well. But overall, I had quite the experience, and I'm still very grateful for what community college was able to do for me. And I can't wait to talk about it more today.
Awesome. Thank you, Alexis. Thanks for serving as the student trustee on the Board of Regents. And I'm glad that you got that application fee at the last minute, or else we wouldn't be benefiting as a state from your service on the Board of Regents. So thanks so much for that. I want to start a conversation with the students, and we're going to kick it off with a question to everybody, which is, can you briefly, and Alexis, you already kind of started to do this a little bit, but can you briefly walk us through the timing and decisions that you had to make in order to meet your transfer goal or stay on your transfer pathway? For example, when did you decide your major and which higher education segment you wanted to transfer to? How did these decisions affect the number of units you completed and the time it took to move through the process? So let's start with you, Alexis.
Thank you. Yes. It was definitely a really interesting experience. I think the one perk of being at community college is that, you are given this kind of blank slate, lots of 101 classes, and you're able to explore. So one of my first kind of exploration classes was a cultural geography class, which is how I ended up finding geography as a real passion of mine. I was kind of, in the beginning, I just thought political science because I wanted to do disaster relief, surprisingly enough. And so kind of ended up shifting to loving geography, and ended up maintaining both of those even into Berkeley. As for the places that I had applied to and that decision, I made my decision for schools. I was originally going to only apply to CSUs, and then potentially tag to Davis because that seemed like a possibility. But I wasn't planning on applying to UCLA or UC Berkeley or anything like that until actually one of the mentors that I had in my life pointed it out, hey, are you going to be applying to these different places? And I actually, had not thought about that before. And within the next year, I was applying to actually places like Stanford as well, because I got a free application from them and ended up getting one of the 25 students that were waitlisted that year. And so just to show how much I was underestimating myself, right? And so the exploration was definitely a part of it. I think also geographically speaking, being a rural student did affect me. I didn't feel good enough for any of those schools because there was no real opportunities here. There's not really internships for nonprofits. I can't work at the Capitol, that kind of thing. So that definitely was difficult, as well as maintaining financial stability. But those were a part of the factors that expanded my unit count by an extra year. It was a mixture of not enough things that I felt like I had done, not feeling good enough, and then also definitely the financial burden as well that extended my time.
Thank you, Alexis, and congrats on getting waitlisted at Stanford. I grew up in Palo Alto. I tried 3 times. I never got waitlisted at Stanford, and now I represent them. So, but no, it's good to broaden your horizons and have people in your life that encourage you to do that. Is so important and sometimes lacking. Rochelle, will you tell us a little bit? And let me know if you need me to repeat the question, but kind of walk us through the timing and decisions that you had to make in order to meet the transfer goal.
Yeah, sure. So Assemblymember Berman, I would just like to say, you don't have to repeat the question, we're fine. So I think I mentioned earlier that I took an English placement exam. And when I actually retook that test, I actually scored in the highest college level course, which means I would straight go into college level English. But the lady who was taking the exam, she couldn't believe the huge jump that I had in my score and actually claimed that I had cheated, which was so discouraging to hear because I told her I took honors English. So I'm actually good at English, just so that I was informed how vital this exam is. So, first when I came in, I kind of took it as a joke, which was on me because I wasn't told the importance of it. When I retook it, I think I just felt so shocked because she was accusing me of something I hadn't even done. And then she actually continued on to tell me that I would most likely never pass my college level courses. And I just felt really discouraged because I'm like, I don't understand. Like, you should be, motivating me, not discouraging me. And unfortunately, my experience with a lot of the advisors was like, oh yeah, well, you're here, but you're probably gonna be here for like 6 years. Like, I mean, I'm coming in thinking I'm gonna be here for just 2 years, right? And I'm being told I'm probably gonna be here for 6 years. But it eventually, I just think there was a lack of support that I felt on an emotional level.
Mm-hmm. I'm sorry to hear that you had to go through that, but I'm glad you persisted. Jared, how about you?
So what factored into my timing? I think there's a lot of things. So coming from high school, I felt underprepared in English and math. Through a strange set of events, I actually had a substitute for an entire year in my senior year for high school English. So I just really didn't feel that I prepared enough, and like I said, I struggled to do in my classes due to things that continued into my college experience. When I got there, oddly enough, I tested the highest level English course, even though I didn't feel prepared. But for math, I felt I was at the very bottom for it. So I felt kind of intimidated, not sure if I could do it, and a lot of strong, a lot of expressions of people telling me to just go ahead and start with the bottom and work your way. Like, no, not really any encouragement about resources, about, hey, how can you study? Here's how you can better prepare for the placement test, which I don't think that's an issue anymore, from my understanding. I think that I loved the plurality of classes, but when I was struggling, I ended up changing my major many times because I would flunk out of core classes that were required for my major. And I would try to take them at neighboring colleges, but due to scheduling conflicts, lack of ability to transport myself, being in a rural area where internet is, at times I've had to stay in like the McDonald's parking lot to do classes and finals. And all of this ended up causing me to change my major multiple times, added to units. So despite when I got into a more stable situation to where I felt more daring to try to go into something like engineering, I learned that I was maxed out on units, didn't understand how to advocate for things such as academic renewal, and ended up settling on a major that I love, but like I probably would have picked something else.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Jared. And next up, I think we have Gerald.
Yes, so when I first arrived at community college, I knew I wanted to be an attorney, but I had no idea what I would possibly want to study for my undergraduate degree. And I knew I wanted to transfer to a school within the UC system, or some private schools, maybe out of state or USC. My counselor kind of suggested that I should take criminal justice because I wanted to be an attorney. And so that kind of seemed obvious there. So I took all these criminal justice courses only to find out that it is not a major offered at the UC system. It's only offered at CSUs. So therefore my credit wouldn't even count towards my UC evaluated GPA or even trying to apply. So that was just crazy to me. I decided to go to different counselors because I was so upset, like what my path should be. And after the 30th counselor, just kidding, but I decided to do my own research. And I found that certain universities don't even offer criminal justice. So I had to figure out that there's an honors program at my neighboring college that 90% of the students end up going to UCLA. There's also a Pathway to Law program at my sister college that partners with UCLA. There's a UC Regent Scholarship, and that the majors I should take are political science and sociology because they do best on the LSAT, and that's just an interest of mine. So that's what I ended up taking. Suffice it to say, I'm taking 24 units every semester now when an average full-time student takes 15 units. So I say that to say this: advisement is everything. It is the most integral part in the transfer process. And if I would have been advised at the start, say, hey, if you want to go to a UC, you shouldn't major in criminal justice because that's not a transferable major, then I would be on a whole different track, and my time at community college would be much shorter than it is now, and I wouldn't be stacking 24 units.
Mm-hmm. And thank you for that, Gerald. And I just, can't help but wonder how many students that don't have the, they won't do that investigation like you did to find out, what the best solution is, and then we lose them, and then they get discouraged and they drop off. But I'm glad you stuck with that. And Josh, I saw you kind of nodding and agreeing with a lot of what Gerald was saying. Tell us a little bit about what decisions you made.
Oh yeah, thank you. Going off of what Gerald is saying, advisement is key, and at San Diego City College and in a lot of the community colleges across the district or across the state, counseling is getting hit hard, especially with COVID-19 and the deferment of a lot of funding. Counseling is one of the first programs to get hit. Students, they're given appointments, scheduling dates to enroll at 12 o'clock at night sometimes, and at 12:01. All of the dates for that whole entire day will be booked. The demand is really high. So I agree that advisement is key in the transfer process. So I think it's necessary to, if we can't have extra funding, to create a curriculum where students can learn how to pick their courses that are necessary for their transfer and their degrees on their own. But as far as what I was saying, my process, I knew I wanted to be a civil rights attorney. So to do that, I wanted to go into to political science. To do that, my timing, I'm a former foster youth, so I was given actually a lot of support through the different organizations in San Diego, Just in Time, Promises to Kids, as well as the other state funds. And in that way, it has uplifted me from high school, going from a 3.0 GPA to now going to community colleges. I'm almost reaching 4.0, and I'm looking at higher schools. But in the end, advisement was something that has really helped me improve and to choose the courses that are necessary for my degree. And now I'm only expected to be attending 2 years at the community college.
Awesome. Awesome. And I saw some of my colleagues agreeing with you about the importance of counseling, and I definitely do too. So now we're going to go into a new phase where I'm going to ask our students to dive a little deeper into a couple of questions. So for Rochelle, can you talk about your experience with the placement process and academic advising and how it positively or negatively impacted your transfer journey?
Yeah, so I think I touched base on that a little bit, but I think the placement process was something that, as I mentioned earlier, it was I didn't feel like it was not guided in the healthiest way, because the importance of it was not obviously we weren't being told about it. And I think that I struggled immensely. I can go back to this was with my math courses as well, because I did get placed in the lowest level, and I had to actually keep repeating all of my math classes until I finally made it to, I believe, statistics. And it did keep me behind for a while. I didn't have enough money to hire a private tutor, which prevented my ability to quickly maneuver through my community college experience. I think some positive experiences I've had is that I did qualify for the EOPS program, which is a program for low-income students. And because I qualified for that, I was eventually able to get advising a lot much more quickly than other students. And so they really would touch base. They would touch base with us on a monthly, on a weekly basis. Actually, they would have me come in and ask me, like, how do I feel about my classes? How am I doing? And I think that really did keep me motivated. But I know that that was actually, in a way, that was my privilege, because you have to be qualified for this program, right? I know that a lot of my peers were actually stuck and waiting to see a counselor, as I mentioned earlier, for like 2 months. So, but I did take, and they actually also helped, and they gave me a stipend, which was able to help me get my books for free pretty much, because I didn't have to pay for my college textbooks, which was really nice. And they actually even had a program, and we went out and we checked out Fresno State and some of the schools together. So that program was very well put together, and I want to give a shout out to President Christian, for really implementing that program and making sure that it was truly helping students in the way that needed to be navigated. But I think that when the AAT came out, the Associate's Transfer Degree, I was not informed that it was going to be so vital in the job force. I was the way it was explained was like, oh, it's optional, like you can take it if you want. And now when I look back, it would have been so nice for me to come out with that AA in my hands, because now when I apply for positions, a lot of people are asking for it. So I think sometimes there's a communication barrier that exists, because they're kind of going through you a bit quickly.
Thank you, Rochelle. Josh, you're currently a community college student and applying to transfer to four-year universities. Can you talk about your experience with the transfer application process itself and how transfer requirements are similar or different based on the institution?
Yeah, of course. I'm a bit familiar, as I'm actually going through the process right now. CSUs and UCs, they utilize the IGETC and assist.org as an articulation agreement. But one of the things that I want to mention and emphasize is that although they tell you the course that you need to take, they don't tell you how to take them. And that's why counseling is necessary. So I think if there were some type of legislation that ensured that the IGETC or assist.org would show the students how to take the classes, what order to take the classes, and a little bit more tips around that for each institution and the agreements between the two, I think that would be of immense help to allow the students to understand what courses they need to take. And USCs and other private schools and universities, they usually have their own articulation agreement if they have one. I know for Columbia University, they just label the courses that you will need to take in order to be admitted with the major that you have. And for the actual admissions process, the UCs have a supplemental questions, also known as just essays. I believe there's just one mandatory for transfer students. I believe there's 3 out of 5 that you get to choose. And CSUs, they do not require essays, except with the exception of if you're being considered for EOPS, which in that case they would request an essay. The UC system is based on a holistic system, so it's considering the person as a whole, where the CSUs just weigh mostly upon grades and scores and put it into the algorithm and determine where, or also based off of where you live and what college you attended, where relative to where the university is located, they determine if you're admitted or not. I also do want to emphasize the importance of Prop 16. I know Assemblymember Weber is very big on Prop 16. There needs to be an emphasis on diversity in the enrollment process, and Prop 16 will allow the UCs and CSUs to take in diversity into account. It's very important for all the students at the California community colleges, because that's where there's a lot of very diverse student population in the California community colleges. So it's important that they have equal opportunities to get into these universities. And as a result of COVID-19, a lot of the colleges, including the UCs, are waiving the SAT requirements. I know the UCs are waiving them permanently after, I believe, 2022 or somewhere along those lines, which is very important for equity issues. There's a lot of equity issues with the SATs being taken into account, where people from a wealthier background, they get more funding for prep tests and preparing for the SATs. Not necessarily that they're smarter, it's just that they can afford the tests and the personal tutors. For me personally, as a foster youth, and I actually did not have a lot of that access to a lot of those resources. So my SAT scores I was not most confident in. And because of COVID-19, if they're being waived, it gives me a lot more confidence when I'm applying to a lot of the public universities in California, the private universities, including USCs, and so on. And that is basically it. If you have any other questions, I'll be glad to answer them.
Thank you, Josh. And you covered a lot of important topics. And we're slowly belatedly realizing a lot of the kind of inherent racism or inequities in a lot of the systems we have. And you touched upon a lot of that, which I know a lot of us agree with you on. Gerald, a recent PPIC report found that large racial and ethnic gaps persist in transfer rates. For example, while 57% of white students and 58% of Latino students earned 12 units and attempted any math and English course within 3 years of initial enrollment, only 41% of Black students did so. What has been your experience navigating transfer, and what supports either are available or, in your experience, should be available to address some of those equity gaps?
Well, this is a really great question. This 17% disparity is one amongst many others. And being in the Black Student Union, being in a position of leadership when the statewide Black caucus, I find that this is very indicative of the Black student experience. We come out of high school already behind, colored by academic achievement gaps, wealth gaps, and opportunity gaps. Even for me, I always had this pit of trepidation in my stomach that whispered to me, telling me, once I take statistics or once I take calculus, I could kiss my 4.0 goodbye. I think it's not that we don't think that we're capable of success in math. It's the fact that math is scary enough. And then in addition to the fact that we are already behind when it comes to access and resources, we don't have things such as a quiet environment at home or fancy calculators and computers that our peers may have. Math just seems so impossible. I remember signing up for my first statistics class, and I chose the highest rated professor on Rate My Professor. I live by that. And after the first day of class, I went up to her at the end and I showed her a problem that she assigned for homework. And I said, hey, can I have help with this, or can you walk this problem through with me? And she told me, if you're having a hard time understanding this now, you don't belong in this class. And I dropped the class that night, but those words definitely stuck with me. I did not want to take any math class after that. And when I was eventually forced to take statistics, I was forced to take it because I had to be eligible for the transfer admissions guarantee for UCSB, but I passed it with an A when I eventually had to take it. But just those words, her alone, me going to a professor and asking her, hey, can I have help with this problem? and her response, it just really shook me up, and those words really stuck with me. So that's when I believe programs such as EOPS come in, as Rochelle mentioned. EOPS is the Extended Opportunities Program and Services. And at Moore Park College, it has truly been my saving grace. For first generation, low income, disproportionately impacted students of color, they offer so much. They pay a portion of our textbook costs. They pay for our parking passes. We get personalized counseling. So not just like the 15-minute advisement, we have a long 30-minute to an hour counseling appointments where they make a robust educational plan. There's a food program. They loan us supplies like laptops and technology. And my favorite thing about EOPS had to be during the school year when campus was open, I would go into that office from sunrise to sundown and just have a quiet place to be able to study. So programs like that are definitely invaluable to closing these equity gaps and for Black and Indigenous, people of color, Latinx achievement. So yeah, those are my thoughts on that.
Thanks, Gerald. And I mean, between you and Rochelle talking about it, I'd love to see somebody do a study on EOPS and, the return on investment for the long run of how much the state saves by giving students the extra support they need while they're going through the process, and how that helps them get through the process faster and more successfully. So that might be something for me to think about in the future. Jared, what was your experience navigating your transfer pathway while also balancing other responsibilities such as your job, and what barriers or challenges did you face? You touched upon a couple of them earlier. Would love for you to dive a little deeper on that.
Thank you, Assembly Member. So I think that I think that one thing that was super difficult in navigating my transfer pathway was that I found that a lot of courses, even when I was at Delta, would only be available either morning through maybe early afternoon versus early afternoon, and then others early afternoon to like part of the afternoon, and very few late courses. So I would find myself in a position where once I found, any part-time work that would work for me, it'd be difficult. It'd almost be a difficult semester to semester. I wasn't able, in addition, there were some courses where the college wasn't able to tell me, and I understand that there's difficulty in planning, but for me, it was very important because, like I said, I was independent and trying to put myself through. There are some courses where they wouldn't know beyond a semester, or there wasn't really like a guaranteed time when certain courses would be taught. I've also ran into a situation where some courses were only taught in the spring versus only in the fall. So if I came into a situation where, okay, spring's here, oh no, this is at a time where it does not work for me, then I would have to scramble to try to find another solution, and I think that was a really big barrier for me. In addition, I think oftentimes a lot of people I meet assume that, I beg your pardon, community college students are, at home and, have all their needs met by their parents. For me, it was not like that at all. And despite having part-time jobs, I even had a restaurant job, where they're famed with being more flexible with your schedule. I've had employers tell me, either tell me, oh, you can either work here or you can take your class. We need you for this time. We're not going to be flexible with you, and having to drop, or other jobs entirely discourage me from going. I've worked at a music retail store, and they're just told me they don't hire college students usually. And I found that experience with a lot of jobs I had. In addition, I think navigating the transfer pathway, there's very limited online courses, and I understand there's difficulty with this, but as an example, my science courses are scheduled in a 3-hour block, where hour and a half lab, hour and a half lecture. And oftentimes those wouldn't be spaced in a way to where it would help night students or students who are working. and I was disappointed to see, okay, well, maybe I can make my schedule work if there's a way to take the lecture online and only the lab in person, or, do you have a weekend option? And I've tried to express, these concerns to every committee I can, and never really was able to see any different option. So that was also just very difficult. Despite there's some flexibility, it didn't really seem like somehow things were shaped in a way that would help. Especially my friends who had a 9-to-5 job, they had the same difficulty, and some never managed to take science. In addition to the job, I think that a lack of counseling also made it difficult to plan better. I ended up becoming my own academic advisor, studied the catalog, and managed to get through just fine. But those were some of the biggest hurdles for me. I think that we can learn from COVID. I know that my college has managed to find ways to ship anatomy models to students and do science courses at home. So it'd be nice to see more of that in the future. Thank you. Thank you, Assembly.
Thank you, Jared. And your point is such a good one, that there's this misconception of who the typical community college student is, and I think that student being a 19-year-old who lives with their parents and is just doing is doing this because for some reason or other they couldn't go to UC or CSU straight out of high school, is a relic of 1960 and a relic of that original master plan. And you and your experience represent a heck of a lot more the real experience of the vast majority of students today. And I agree with maximizing the experience of COVID. I mean, necessity is the mother of invention, and we should really identify what changes we made that worked well and figure out how to scale those and keep those. So I appreciate that point. Alexis, as we've heard, time to degree impacts affordability. How has time to degree and affordability impacted your transfer journey?
Thank you for that. And I will say they really do feed into each other, right? So affordability impacts how long you take, but then at the same time, the length of time that you take ends up making things more expensive, which also affects affordability, right? Which is why a lot of those problems carry over. So, I mean, in just my case, I had a lot of difficulty. I am a low income student. And so, there were multiple things that happened, but of course, there's also just this kind of overall, we don't have money, my family doesn't have money. How do I do this? Right. And luckily there is the Promise Grant, which is, of course, I don't have to pay for tuition, which is great. But the actual basic needs outside of that were always a problem for me, especially since life is dramatic and, we all deal with things during that time. And so for me, one of the big events that really hurt me was a car accident I had gotten into my second year at community college when I was driving home from one out of two of my jobs. And, ended up costing me about $3,000 that went straight to collections. It's still there, haven't touched it. So on top of course, regular student debt that I'm attaining from UC Berkeley, I also have this kind of debt in the back of my head, right? That's just right there, slowly increasing, on top of also credit cards, right? I have two of them, just about $5,000 worth, right there. And that was all before I came into the UC system, right? So for like a cheap, affordable system, it ends up not becoming cheap and affordable. Another thing is that, just to highlight COVID, right? Berkeley was able to give me financial assistance during COVID, but I know that my community college counterparts were not able to receive the same thing. And so I was significantly better off being at a UC during this time. Additionally, kind of like what Jared was talking about, right? We are not a system that has, just a bunch of 19-year-olds out of college or out of high school living with our parents. And so, financial aid has these limitations that a lot of people don't realize, going over the age of 27 or, staying a year or two out of high school, just working and then going back. They all limit you in terms of financial aid. And so we did have the Cal Grant reform kind of bill that came forward earlier this year, but it had to be put aside because of COVID. And that would have given students, I think it was around $6,000, I believe either semester, to be able to, alleviate those costs. And that would be so incredible for students to have, right? It's one of those things where it's like, no wonder 10% of Berkeley's undergraduate students and 20% of graduates are homeless. No wonder a significant number of those students end up being transfer students. It's because we come into these systems full of debt. And the only reason that we're still here is because we've had to fight back against every single institution that we've had to face during this entire time. None of it has been easy. And most of the time, almost all the time, that primary issue is financial aid and the lack of basic needs and us just trying to make ends meet. And so, that ends up being a huge problem for all of us. We end up carrying that with us through transfer into a new school, into our potential careers, into the internships we're able to take on. In my current research, I'm looking at, almost like mapping hope. Like, how are we able to physically see, hope and opportunity in students across the state and like how their surroundings affect them. And, right now, if we don't have financial aid to support that, then our students are going to end up failing and continuing to have these issues because it's something that we need in order to be able to fix all these other systemic issues.
Thank you, Alexis. And your point about how you were better off at Berkeley than you were in community college and how that's so flipped. I think it was TICAS, the Institute for College Access and Success. I hope I'm getting that right. That did a study that showed that community college is actually more expensive when you factor in financial aid and all the other different things that are available at the CSU and UC system than community college is. And it really cuts against the narrative that exists out there about how community college is so cheap. But when you factor in the real cost of college, it's not nearly as cheap. So you all have already done this, but I just want to give everybody a chance, if you want to pinpoint certain things about what, we really want to hear your recommended solutions to improve the transfer process as students have lived it, and what you would change about the transfer process and why. You've all touched upon this in your comments already, but if you have anything additional that you want to add, would love to get any suggestions you have. Let's start with Jared, if you have any additional recommendations.
Thank you, Assembly Member, and I offer these suggestions, excited to see what changes can be in the future. Number one, I think scheduling for classes that reflect the needs of the community. I've seen a lot of people who had difficulty completing their education because of that, and even inconsistency amongst times where the college itself would agree to have a student break in the afternoon. Increased mental health, financial aid, and academic counseling is important. I've seen the difference between me at MJC, where I had a lack of resources and I failed. Delta, I had more and I did better. UOP, they take really good care of me with mental health and counseling. I'm glad to say I have a 3.91. I've been on honors the entire time, and I turn around and mentor the community on staying in school, and trying to advocate for change. Lastly, I think we need to learn from COVID. Wi-Fi, provide more Wi-Fi and tech. I have friends who can't afford technology, and maybe find more ways to innovate science classes at home, like where possible, and greater use of the weekend. Thank you.
Thank you, Jared. Josh, what recommendations do you have?
Perfect. Yeah, I just want to make this brief. Firstly, as Alexis has mentioned, and how this is very crucial, is that we waive the application fees for California community college students. Counseling, we need better counseling, as Gerald has mentioned, in advising. You should not have to see a counselor in order to get proper advising. I think a good way, I've even saw in the questions, e-advising would be perfect. Ability to advise the student specifically on how and what classes to take for their major. And all around better communication between California community colleges and universities, four-year universities. I think that is prime. There needs to be a more seamless communication between the two, and better for everything. And then also, in addition, tag options. there's only really a select few of universities that offer tags. It needs to be just more options, and that is the sum. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Josh. Gerald, do you have any additional recommendations you'd make?
Absolutely. So yeah, we know that as we've talked, just following the theme of this conversation, we know that California community college system is the largest system of higher education in the country, and is the primary access point of higher education for first generation, low income, underrepresented minority groups such as myself. So that being said, I think it's imperative that we advocate for more funding for programs such as EOPS, that we're making sure that our curriculum that we teach our students are reflective of the research experiences, history, and culture of Black, Indigenous people of color. I would make sure that we're hiring faculty, staff, managers, administrative, that reflect the world that we live in today. People like me, people like Josh, people like Alexis, people like Rochelle, and people like Gerald should be able to go to professors, admin, and teachers and see people who look like them, people who they could go up to and seek advice from, say, hey, what should I do about this particular situation? I think we also need to empower our underrepresented students and put them in positions of leadership and decision-making to be able to actually make decisions that affect them, such as administrative policies, board of trustees policies. So definitely giving enfranchisement to our student trustees. I think.
Oh, go ahead.
Oh yeah, I'm almost done. I think
No, take your time.
Definitely need to make sure our student services and departments are culturally competent, responsive, and anti-racist. Our counseling services need to know how to take community college students to HBCUs. We should be able to get the tutoring, the counseling, the mental health services that we need that fit our particular racial and ethnic group. And we need more co-enrollment courses. So courses that reach out to students who have low GPAs, reach out to students of color, reach out to students who aren't doing good and bring them in to make courses particular to them. And that's all. Thank you so much, Assemblymember Berman.
That's great. Thank you, Gerald. And Rochelle, would you like to add some suggestions? And I believe you're still muted.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, thanks.
Yeah, sorry about that.
No.
Yeah, thank you so much. So I believe that the transfer process can be improved if advisors, professors, and policymakers make a concrete effort to create policies which prioritize students' needs who might be at the highest risk. What that means is that we're looking into immigrant students, we're looking into students that might have been incarcerated, that might be also be stemming from foster care, students that are non-traditional. I believe that there should be a program on campus which especially helps students that are dealing with these issues, and we shouldn't be confining them by putting an age limit of 18. I know that when I was a senator for student government, a lot of students told me they couldn't join certain things because they came to community college after 18 and they didn't qualify. And I think that, we can't really expect students to become successful on a fundamental level if we can't provide them with even, going back to what Josh said, even mental health services. On campus. We need to become trauma-informed institutions and make sure we provide services that give emotional support, because nobody's arriving to be stuck, and once they feel that way, they become unmotivated, depressed, and drop out. College and states should view that result as evidence that financial aid and social service policies are not doing enough to help community college students succeed.
Totally agree. Thank you, Rochelle. And Alexis, last but definitely not least.
Thank you. Yes, I definitely want to echo some things like waiving application fees and all that. That's really great. I'd say number one, first and foremost, passing Cal Grant reform. That just it's like the one fix all, right? And it's not fixing everything, but it helps just about every area that we're having issues in, right? Money doesn't buy happiness, but it keeps us off the streets. And so we need it desperately. Also, at post passing Cal Grant reform, looking into summer Cal Grant, I think is definitely a great solution as well, because, as a transfer student, if I have used up my Cal Grant, as most of us have, we don't have enough to be able to take summer courses. And oftentimes as transfer students, we're the ones who end up falling behind on classes or having to take a lesser load when we transfer, things like that end up putting us behind. And so summer Cal Grant would definitely be great. Another thing is, giving us some of the Band-Aid legislation, like, they don't fix everything. But for example, things like, I know the parking lot bill had went down, I think it was AB 302. Things like that are, obviously not huge, amazing fixes to everything, right? It's not going to house homeless students, but it changes lives and helps save them as well. And so little things like that are always important. Of course, encouraging the UCs to get aligned, which is something that I'm, of course, doing in my position, trying to get them all to, I shouldn't have to take 5 additional classes that I wouldn't need to because UC San Diego needed it and UCLA needed a different one and that kind of thing. As well as increasing programs for rural students as a personal ask. But I think one of the biggest things that I think would be really impactful is increasing student representation. And by that, I just mean, we do have AB 2910, and that one is supposed to come back, I believe. But it's making sure that students aren't just being used as tokens and voices. And I know going from, that kind of small local level student advocacy to the state, it's like now I'm being listened to. Now people are listening to me. But on the campus level, oftentimes we're brushed aside. And some changes are very simple. They don't need the legislature to act on it, right? We just need simple little changes in counseling or whatever it is. And we try to advocate for those things, but oftentimes we're not given a place at the table. We're not allowed to sit with everybody. We're not allowed to, do all these different things. Students aren't being paid for all the time that they dedicate to it. And so something as simple as just allowing districts who do honor the student voice to be able to let us vote on things and really have a voice, I think would be absolutely incredible and really impactful on the local level all across the state.
Totally agree. Thank you, Alexis. And I mean, from what I've heard today from all 5 of you, it would be a crime if the local leaders, the people on the community college boards didn't seek you out to get your advice, because you're the ones who have gone through this. You're the ones who know much better than we do. And thank you, so much for helping educate me and my colleagues today on the real lived experiences that you're going through and some simple fixes to help make that experience better. So really appreciate that. And thank you all for sticking around for a Q&A that we'll get to in a few minutes. I now want to introduce Alyssa Wynn, who's Director of Research and Evaluation at the RP Group. And Alyssa is going to speak about students speak their transfer truth, what they need to get through the gate. Thank you for joining us, Alyssa.
Thank you, Assemblymember Berman. We're a little past cutting close to the time here. So what I'm going to be doing is doing a blitz of what I was going to share in 10 minutes and 5 minutes. Okay, so I'm going to share screen. And then just let me know if you see the screen.
We do. I do.
Quick confirmation. Perfect. Thank you. So thank you all again for inviting us to share our findings from a multi-year project we engaged in to look at the transfer perspectives of an often under-researched student population. So most of the research conducted around transfer success has primarily focused in on the experiences of and the successes of transfer student populations. So what is often missing is a perspective looking at individuals who have met most or all of their transfer requirements, but who have not yet made it through the transfer gate as a potential strategy for helping the systems identify actions and potential strategies to boost transfer within our systems. So the study that we conducted through the generous funding of our partners, College Futures Foundation, was a multi-year study taking a look at trying to unpack and understand what the transfer experiences are like for a population of students who, again, have met most or all of their transfer requirements, but have not yet transferred. So we first wanted to get a sense of like, how what is that proportion in our system at any given time? How many students are we talking about? Who are those students? And what are some of the factors that are either facilitating or inhibiting their capacity to successfully make it through the gate? Ergo, the title of the study, Through the Gate. So in this multi-stage and multi-year study, we took a look at the data across the system in the California Community College system, mapping out the transfer landscape, and then we followed that up with interviews and surveys with a sample of the students who had met most or all of their transfer requirements. So this visual here provides that landscape that was uncovered from looking at the transcript history of over nearly 1 million California community college students during a time between 2010 and 2015. So the students of interest, of particular interest, are these students here who we call students at the gate or near the gate. So these students are students who had met most of all of their transfer requirements, but had not yet transferred within a 6-year time frame. And so what we learned was that there is definitely a missed opportunity in the sense that at any given year, based on this cohort of students, there are nearly 60,000 students at any given year who are stuck at the transfer gate. What we also learned, and this is in for the students who are near the gate, is that math is a barrier. But given some of the changes in our current system, like AB 705, hopefully math will no longer be the barrier for many of these students. And then another important thing to note is that time is the enemy for many of these students who have met most or all of their transfer requirements, in that if they don't transfer within 1 year, we're finding that the likelihood of them transferring at all decreases over time. And then one of the more exciting findings from the study in looking at the transcript history was that, not surprisingly, African-American students of all groups were the least likely of all racial groups to make it near or at the gate. But what was exciting was once African-American and Black students made it to the gate, they were the most likely to transfer and make it through the gate. So data can only tell us so much. So we needed to really talk to students to try to understand what were some of the factors supporting their success. So from surveys and interviews with over 800 students, what we're finding is that, not surprisingly, students are motivated to transfer to have a better life for themselves and others, and that students really need a more holistic and integrated approach to ensure their progress. And as Assembly Member Berman noted earlier in today's session, that every segment has a role in supporting student success, transfer success. So I'm going to leave you all with 4 factors that we unpacked and uncovered in speaking to these students. So in talking to the students, 4 essential factors kept popping up and emerging in those stories. And the stories parallel quite nicely with today's panel. So of all of the factors identified, finances are the biggest hurdle students cite regarding transfer, and this is regardless of age, gender, or racial backgrounds. Students are often juggling numerous and often competing schoolwork and family responsibilities, and we find that female students relative to their male counterparts are more likely to cite that as being a challenge to their transfer experience. The third factor, pathway navigation. Students are often missing accurate and timely information about pursuing a bachelor's degree throughout their transfer journey, both from the community colleges and the prospective universities. Oftentimes, students talked about having to triangulate different sources of information and talking to multiple people. And as the students here in today's panel, like Alexis pointed out in terms of hidden rules, and Gerald reflecting on having to talk to 30 different counselors to get the information he needed, students really, really need timely and accurate information from both segments in order to succeed. And then the final factor, support network. Support for many of these students play a significant role in their motivation, and that the colleges and universities really play an essential role in activating this network. And this is especially critical for students who do not have role models in their personal lives. And so the significance of a support network at the colleges and universities are extremely important for these students. So regarding these factors, it was really clear, just as it is clear in listening to our panel of students today, that some of these factors carry more weight for certain student experiences than other, and that a one-size-fits-all approach to transfer support isn't going to cut it for today's students. So I'm skipping through all of that. So for more information on the study, you can check out our project webpage at rpgroup.org/throughthegate. Thank you.
That's awesome. Thank you, Alyssa. And my understanding is that we are going to share the slides with everybody after today's kind of presentation. So thanks again for providing that information and helping highlight some of the challenges students are facing and where we can better intervene and support them. So we have had a very engaged and active audience today with lots of questions. But before we get to some of the audience questions, I wanted to ask my colleagues if any of them have any questions that they would like to ask either the panelists or some of the experts that have spoken today.
I actually would just like to make a couple of comments and ask Alexis a question. You guys were incredible about articulating what the problems are and articulating the solution. So this was a very worthwhile for me, and we're jotting down notes to see if there's anything we can do legislatively. Obviously, a lot of the solutions you are talking about require more resources, and that's definitely going to be an issue going forward. But we certainly want to do everything we can to address this issue. And before Alexis, I want to say, Gerald, thank you for repping Ventura County, my local. Alexis, you were talking about aligning coursework at the community college to the UC, and that was really what these transfer pathways were supposed to do. And so do you think this is still a work in progress, or what is the issue? And then I don't know, from your perspective, you're at Cal, was there a difference between the pathways for Cal State and for UC? So, I mean, I think there's a lot of promise in these pathways, but what you're saying is disturbing, because I thought we were supposed to address that.
Yes, thank you for that. So one thing that I found is that, so I think the best way is, it's funny, it's a learning by example sort of way. I know we did, when I was at MJC, we went to the Academic Senate and we looked at, we gave them a catalog. We gave them a computer that was put on assist.org, right, which is the kind of transferring things over. We gave them an IGETC sheet, and we gave them a 4-year plan. We were like, okay, figure it out. And I think that's a part of the problem, is that it was so difficult that after 5 minutes, they were like, how is it this hard? And a lot of that problem, it is because, of course, IGETC has a really great layout of how you get your AAT, right? And it's all about transferring. And so, you pick 2 from this part of the list, you pick 2 from here. The hard part is aligning that also with the major and the schools that you want to go to. So for example, right, if I am going to, let's just say Riverside, or I want to go to Riverside, and I'm doing political science, the math that I take, even though I just have to take one under that list, it actually has to be a very specific one, because if I want to take, statistics for social behavioral sciences, that sounds good for me. And Riverside accepts that, but Berkeley doesn't. Berkeley wants you to take this other statistics course, right? And so there's little differences like that, and they're very subtle. And sometimes, students don't realize that when they're transferring in, because you have to look up each college individually to see which ones they want. And then you have to kind of cater to that. So if I took the wrong one, and then ended up having to, take a totally different one once I transferred. And so all of those are sort of some of the issues with it. And so I would say, that's a big issue. And also just the CSUs all have alignment there. The real problem right now is, I think, with the UCs, because a lot of the schools still have individual classes that they specifically require for certain majors. And so then you have to kind of go comparing, okay, if I want to apply to San Diego, I need these extra 2 classes. And you do that for every single school, and it adds up a lot.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much.
Any other colleagues?
If I could just, and I see we're out of time, so I'm not going to take up, I want to thank everybody for their stories. And I want to thank especially all the Central Valley folks for being so tenacious and gritty. That's how we do it. We just keep on going. And I love, Alexis, you talking about mapping hope. I think that's going to be a great dissertation right there. I guess one of the questions I have, and maybe for the researchers, is as there is more community college credits available on high school campuses now, are we seeing that process between students starting earlier and then making that process more smooth on the way out? And we can answer these. We can talk about this forever. So if you can tell me now, you can. But if not, again, just thank you all for your tenacity and my colleagues for taking the time. And this is something we got to fix. We have to get this right.
Josh, Alyssa, do either of you have any thoughts on that, or we can also, that can be a answer for later. Dr. Eggman, we'll get back to you on that, but good question. Thank you. Any other colleagues? Dr. Weber? Nope. Dr. Weber, thank you so much for participating. Well, the good news is that the bad news, I should say, is that we have more questions from the audience than time to answer them all. The good news is that a lot of them, I know students have already touched upon. And so one question that I want to quickly ask as we kind of wrap up is, what do you see as the relationship between reforming Cal grants to cover costs of living and the ability to progress more quickly through community college to transfer? And what about expanding Cal grant opportunities for returning students? Do any of our students want to take those on? Josh, go for it.
Yeah, definitely. And as an outreach ambassador at San Diego City College, this is sad, but I've had students call in asking for guidance of whether they should drop out of college because they just don't have the financial aid that is necessary to stay in school. And so that's like very hard for me to listen to. And I don't think that should be a barrier that is keeping them from investing in their education. So that funding if that funding allows that student to continue to invest in their education and to continue to uplift themselves from their socioeconomic status, that is very vital. And I think that is very necessary to invest in higher Cal Grant aid.
Appreciate that, Josh. Anybody else want to weigh in? Jared?
I think that Cal Grant aid can help more. I hate using the term, but non-traditional students, greater access to aid means less conflict between extra activities like work, and would have greatly helped me in my situation. Just quickly said.
Appreciate that. Thank you. Well, with that, I just really want to thank everyone who attended and participated in today's session. My colleagues, the Campaign for College Opportunity and their team, especially Josh Hagan, for your help to organize such an engaging event. All of our speakers, especially the really, honestly, truly amazing students who shared your story, your very personal stories with all of us. Thank you for being willing to do that so that we can hopefully make the transfer process better for the hundreds of thousands of students that are following in your footsteps. If y'all would all run for your local community college board, the state would be in a much better place, and then run for state assembly after that. Just not against me while I'm in there, please. But even so, that's cool. I'll probably support you over me. Thank you. Honestly, so uplifting to hear your stories. your perseverance to go through the challenges you've gone through. And I know me and my colleagues, we all want to make sure that fewer students have to go through those challenges. So thank you so much. This event is being recorded and will also be available for viewing on the Select Committee webpage, which can be found on my Assembly website under the California Master Plan tab. And I think we put that link in the chat. Please stay tuned for our next conversation on transfer. For information on the work of the Select Committee, please feel free to check the Select Committee's webpage on my Assembly website, and or reach out to my office. Thank you everybody so much, everybody who participated and then everybody who joined in the audience. Really appreciate you taking the time, you caring about these important issues. Stay safe. Thanks so much.